Our brain comes with some pre-installed programs that get activated under the right circumstances. The first set of programs I want to discuss here have to do with our survival instincts. The second set with our personality. Just like Windows is pre-installed on most computers, both sets of programs come standard with our hardware, our brain, and will get activated depending on our context. So let's start with the first one, our survival instincts. The strongest urge all living beings have is the one to survive as individuals but also as a species. During millions of years of evolution, evolving from Homo habilis over Homo erectus etc. to become Homo sapiens, we inherited through our genes a whole set of behaviors and preferences which would keep us safe from harm, thus maximizing our chance of survival on this planet. When it comes to survival, there are really only two scenarios at hand. Or we're facing a danger, or we are safe. So there is the instinctive survival response when we're facing a threat, a danger. This is the well-known fight, flight and fleeing response we saw earlier in the reptilian brain, which translates into stress. I won't cover how to deal with our own stress here as I covered it in depth in my other courses. However, we will be looking at the impact of stress at work and how to deal with team members who are stressed. And then there's the other scenario. Our genetic programming not only covers the survival in moments of being under threat, but also when we are not. So what does it mean? Well, when it comes to the survival of the individual, in the absence of a clear and present danger, it really comes down to three subconscious survival programs. The first one is to avoid danger. The second one is to avoid starvation. The third program is not about the survival of the individual, but of the species, us humans as species. To this purpose, we've inherited two very powerful subconscious preferences, sex and nurturing. The second set of programs has to do with our personalities. We already covered part of that with the Neolimbic brain and the different leadership styles. Here we will see how it shows in our team as well. So yes, personalities of course. You see the link with leadership, but what about avoiding danger, avoiding starvation and so on? How does it has anything to do with us leading a team? How does it affect us and how to deal with it? Well, the answers to all of these are to be found in the next lectures. In the previous section, we looked at the four structures in our brain and how our reptilian brain triggers three strategies to deal with the perceived danger. This perceived danger can be triggered by all kind of stuff, depending on our personal sensibilities, our prior experience and our immediate environment, of course. With immediate environment I mean things, but also people. An unhappy customer, stressed out colleague, a boss who sees his team as galley slaves. Two things here I would like to point out. First, stress is what I like to call the first visually transmittable disease. Recent research shows that it's enough to see someone stressed out to start feeling stress ourselves. The brain subconsciously jumps to the conclusion that if the person has perceived a danger, it might be a good idea to become more vigilant ourselves as well. Before we know, our adrenaline and cortisol levels start rising. The implication for that is that if we as managers and leaders are trapped in the reptilian brain, becoming, as I explained before, a reptilian manager, we will affect our whole team and transmit this stress to them. Second point to understand is that we can be the main cause of stress in our team. Not only because we're stressed ourselves, but through our attitude, what I referred to before as being a dominant Paleolimbic leader. Their management style is more commonly known as management by fear. Threatening, intimidating, shouting, yelling, manipulating, harassing. It's a long list of tools that are being used by these managers. It's all about power. The only way the Paleolimbic manager has found to rise above the others is by pushing the others down. Ridicule and humiliation, often disguised as humor, is their way to get the upper hand. When confronted with it, they go, "Come on, it's just a joke." Well, no, it's not. It's Paleolimbic dominant behavior, and it's a major cause of stress, which can lead to burnouts and depression. The problem with this behavior is that it works. At least in the short term. As we will see in the lecture about avoiding danger, we're programmed to stay out of trouble. So when someone, our boss, is looking for trouble, we stay put. We keep a low profile. We just do as being told. But as I said, more about that in that other lecture. In this lecture, we will be looking at how to deal with stress of our teammates. I will be asking you to take a closer look at the people in your team and around you and how they react to stress, as we will be dealing with relational stress management, or RSM. First thing we should be aware of is the impact of stress on our team. For example, we often think a deadline can help us shake off inertia and focus on getting a job done. Now, brain research shows us precisely the opposite is true. A deadline, instead, more often limits our thinking and can lead to much worse decision-making. You see, a tight deadline increases people's urgency and stress levels. The reptilian brain gets activated when, in order to be more productive and creative, we need our prefrontal brain to be active. Research shows us that the more stressful the deadline is, the less open we are to other ways of approaching a problem. It's important to understand how putting extra pressure on our team to get better results is mostly counterproductive. Remember, the only 3 ways our reptilian brain can react is by fleeing, fighting, or freezing. In other words, it will put us in a state of confusion, aggression, or demoralization. Quality of the work will go down, interpersonal relations will deteriorate, and absenteeism will rise. Now, don't get me wrong, the problem is not the pressure. We're in a highly competitive world, and pressure is part of that. I'm not telling you we should create some kind of la-la land where there is no pressure whatsoever. The issue at hand is how we react to pressure. If it puts our team in one of the 3 stress responses, well, then we have a problem. So the objective is not to eliminate stress triggers, but to use the tools to help our team deal with stress in an effective way. Meaning, how will we communicate and interact with our team to help them switch off the reptilian brain and switch on the prefrontal brain? This is what we're going to see in this chapter. It is quite surprising to see how we often react precisely how we shouldn't when we're faced with a stressed person, thus only making matters worse, or in the best case scenario, failing to have any impact whatsoever on the person in front of us. Think about it for a moment. When we see someone in flea stress who's just walking nervously around or can't sit still, how do we react? How do you react? We'll often raise our voice and try to impose them to sit still or forcing them to sit down. Have you ever said to someone, "Look at me when I'm talking to you"? Does that sound familiar? Newsflash. The person in front of us is in flea stress and isn't actually looking at us because the only thing he or she wants is to get out of there. Forcing him to look at us won't help him calm down. It might help our fight stress, but it won't serve his flea stress. In the same way, when we're faced with someone who's in fight stress, we have the tendency to fight back. Attack is the best defense, right? Well, not really. Will only get matter worse, and 2 people in a fight stress mode tend to escalate conflicts. Not a good idea if your objective is to get people to calm down. Regarding the 3rd strategy, the freeze mode, think about what we do when we're trying to cheer up someone who's feeling depressed. We're trying to put things into perspective, using some humor maybe. Often we can see ourselves trying to instill some courage or willpower. "Come on, you can do it! Are you a man or a mouse?" Well, at that very moment, a person in freeze mode would rather be a mouse, especially if it's a hibernating one. So what should we do? Well, first, we should be able to recognize the different types of stress with others, as all 3 of them have different coping strategies, and applying the wrong one will fail to have impact or could even make matters worse. That's what we're going to see in the next lecture. Relational stress management. So let's have a look at each one of them. How to recognize them, what are the don'ts, and most importantly, what the do's are. RSM flee. Just observe these people for a couple of seconds. It's all about contained movement. They are all over the place. Watch each of them carefully and see how the flee mode has taken over. The biggest giveaway for all 3 strategies are the eyes. In the flee mode, the eyes are looking away. It's almost as if they are searching for an escape route. Clue number 2 are the hands and feet. Moving, fiddling, tapping, scratching, anything, as long as they can move. Repetitive movements are the most common. Finally, there's the fast breathing and sweating. Sweaty palms are very strong indications of flea stress. So what are the red flags? If your aim is to calm the person and move him or her out of that reptilian brain, it won't help to tell that person to calm down. Saying this will only be interpreted as a further restriction of freedom, which is exactly the opposite of what the flea response is aiming at. So avoid constraints or reasoning. No closed questions. A closed question is one where you can only answer by yes or no, or a couple of given options. If you ask someone in flea stress a closed question, the answer will most probably be an evasive one, something like, I don't know. Under constraints, you should also put aggression. Do not shout, threaten or sanction. If you and your team are faced with a deadline that you are about to miss, it's highly counterproductive to remind your team of the negative consequences of missing that deadline. Unless you want them to stress even more, of course, which will most probably lead to mistakes and further delays. The same is true for judging and moralizing. It is highly counterproductive, so it's better to forget about it altogether. So what should we do? Well, exactly the opposite. If closed questions are a red flag, try the open questions. Show them they are free to choose. As they will have some trouble organizing their thought, you could help them with that by giving them some options. De-dramatizing the situation is highly effective. Putting things into perspective will help them realize that the situation at hand is not the end of the world. And I know of no better way than the use of humor to obtain just that. Laughter is the perfect emergency valve to blow off some steam. If possible, invite them to take a walk with you. Give a physical way out for that fleeing instinct. Whatever you do, remember that the flea stress is all about movement and escaping constraints. The fight stress is probably the easiest one to spot. People will stand tall, raise their voice, use strong, precise movements, show impatience. Tension builds up and shows in the neck and jaw, and their eyes are staring, squinting as not to lose sight of the enemy. Oh yes, the enemy. We're talking about a fight mode, and to fight, you need to be two. What should we avoid here? Well, in fight mode it's all about power. Trying to overpower the other by yelling harder won't improve the situation. Most likely the argument will escalate with all the nasty consequences you can imagine. Don't undermine the show of authority that the person in fight stress is displaying. With this I mean avoid to interrupt, question what is being said, or worst of all, laugh. In flea stress, laughter is bliss. In fight stress, it's a one-way ticket to a volcanic eruption that will make the Vesuvius look like a family homemade firework on New Year's Eve. Oh yes, and one last thing. Don't annoy the person in fight stress. I already made my point about the use of humor. Try as well not to be slow. In the fight stress, we show a remarkable lack of patience. Being slow will only trigger a stronger fight response. So what are we to do? Remember that to fight you need to be two. If you don't show any resistance, the fighting becomes futile and will fade away. First, listen without interruption. Then don't find excuses. If you did something wrong, admit it. Take responsibility. You shouldn't have done that. Well, okay, you're right. Yes, I shouldn't have. If you don't agree that you did something wrong, you can still work around it. You can say things like, I'm sorry if what I did made you feel this way. That wasn't my intention. Another way to diffuse the anger is with something like, if I were you, I would be angry too. Say it with conviction. Show that you mean it. Now that the fighter has no one to fight with, explain what happened without looking for excuses, and finally offer solutions. As we saw before, the fight stress is impatient, so get to the point and be factual. Whatever you do, remember that the fight stress is all about overpowering and winning. You're the one who should pick your battles. Actually, only very little of them are worth fighting. Freeze. The first reaction of people to a perceived danger is often to literally stop moving, dropping jaws, or putting their hands in front of their mouth. This gesture is very powerful, as it stops the arrival of oxygen to our lungs. Welcome to the freeze mode. In freezing mode, the whole body is slowing down. Shoulders and head will be hanging. Again, the biggest giveaway are the eyes. They will be looking down, gazing at nothing in particular. Often, they will cover their face with their hands or sustain their head. You will notice that the person will lower its voice, talk slower, and use small sentences, less words. There will be desperate sighs and sometimes even tears. The whole attitude is submissive. There won't be any show of desire nor pleasure. At this point, a person with a normal energy level could have the tendency to almost literally shake up that person, to give him or her a wake-up call. The last thing a person in freeze mode wants is to be autonomous. On the contrary, its objective is to find protection, shelter, sharing and caring. So telling them to get a grip, to be courageous or showing some strength of character will only make them feel more miserable. So what can we do? Let's say you have a performance review with a team member who's underperforming because of private issues that affect his or her professional life. You find him completely demoralized. How do you react? If the freezing mode is about finding protection, well, let's give him just that. First, understand. Mirror his pose. If he's sitting, sit. Is he hunching? Hunch as well. Put yourself literally on his level. Remember that this person won't be willing to talk, so respect that. Sometimes putting an arm around the shoulder does more than the most eloquent speech. Now, I mean this as a figure of speech, as I do realize that this might be not done in some settings. Remember that our objective is to get the other person out of the reptilian brain. To do so, we have to take away the perceived danger. In the freeze mode, this means to offer shelter, protection. Next step will be to define small objectives together. A first small step in the right direction. Guide him. Go along with him. Whatever you do, remember that the freeze stress is all about finding protection. And now some homework. I will ask you to go out there and look. Observe carefully. Look around you. Now you know there are 3 different types of stress. Can you figure out what stress reaction is most common with your colleagues? How do they react under pressure? So go out there, enjoy it, observe silently, do some small experiments. Once you're positive about the stress mode, try to help that person to switch brain structures, to move out of the reptilian brain. See how they react to you. Then do it again and again. Get familiar with dealing with all 3 reactions. Relational stress management is quite easy, but at the same time more tricky than one would think. The tricky part is that some elements that are helpful in one strategy, like for example humor in flee mode, will be counterproductive in others, in this case the fight mode. Another difficulty is that one mode often triggers a stress response in the people around them. The different stress modes are not compatible with each other and only reinforce the stress reactions. For example, the attitude of a person in freeze or flee mode will annoy a person in fight mode, thus making him fight more, which again will make the other person flee or freeze even more. It's a vicious circle with seemingly no end. Last but not least, our stress reaction can change. We can jump back and forth between modes until we calm down. It is totally possible to have the full range of emotions within a couple of minutes. Imagine a traffic jam when you have a meeting coming up. First you become restless, trying to look for a way out. Then you get angry and start using your horn. Finally, you give up, whining that these things always happen to you. Sounds familiar? In essence, when we want to help someone calm down, we need to take the perceived danger away, by demonstrating we are on their side. This is the common element in all 3 strategies. It will take away the need for a defensive reaction, and the stress response will fade away, putting the reptilian brain back in standby mode. From there onwards, we can start having a normal conversation, sort things out, do whatever needs to be done, but it's no use reasoning with stressed people, as the center of reasoning isn't located in the reptilian brain. We first need to bring the stressed person to leave the reptilian brain. So to summarize, when anxious, offer options. When aggressive, go with the flow. When helpless, give support. In the first part, we saw how our brain reacts to a perceived danger by activating our reptilian brain and choosing out of 3 possible survival instincts. What we're going to see now is how there exists an even better survival mechanism than the classical flee, fight or freeze we've discussed before. It's of course good to know how to react when we're facing trouble. It's even better to avoid trouble altogether. You see, millions of years of evolution and natural selection has led to the genes of reckless and thrill-seeking individuals to be underrepresented. Why? Well, reckless individuals usually get into trouble, which hundreds of thousands of years ago would mean you would probably die, and thus be unable to pass your genes on to the next generation. Looking at this from the opposite direction, it means that most of us have an instinctive caution program running in the background that will make us stay safe, so we avoid injuries or bad encounters. This has far-reaching implications in our daily lives, without us even being aware of it. What follows is an overview of some of the consequences of this in a work environment. Resistance to change. Some time ago, with my company Human Dimension, we launched a survey around the challenges managers were facing when dealing with their teams. We received an almost unanimous flow of response, all pointing towards the same challenge, which was change, or more exactly, resistance to change. In our fast-changing world, our brain is still wired to function in a prehistorical setting, constantly screening our surroundings for possible threats and avoiding bad encounters. One of the most effective survival strategies is to repeat what has been successful in the past. This turns us into creatures who like repetition, who like habits. Because if we've been doing an activity over and over, it means it's safe. This is the normal mode. This is what our brain is programmed to do. Now, when we as managers, as leaders, we ask our team to do things differently, our brain on a subconscious level is interpreting things as a possible threat. Change is a source of danger, of discomfort. It activates our reptilian brain and generates stress. One general manager of an SME told me once how change was vital to his organization and how he couldn't even get some employees to change desks. Now, of course, dealing with change is tricky and complex. One point I would like to highlight here, purely from a brain perspective, is that if you want your people to embrace change, you will have to get them out of their reptilian brain. Just as we saw earlier in this course, it's about taking the perceived danger away. We're not the enemy. We're here to help. We're on their side, remember? One way to do that is to get people out of their limbic system by having them think for themselves, give them the elements and let them draw the conclusions for themselves. Lack of initiative. Having a genetic predisposition to avoid danger has also an impact on the initiatives we're taking, or in this case, not taking, because initiative means doing things differently. It means taking risks, and risk is by definition a hazardous activity. So our brain will subconsciously have us avoid that kind of behavior. So with our team, if we want initiative, again we need to take away the risk. Explicitly stating that no one will ever get in trouble because of trying something new is one good way to do it. The concept of a flop meeting is interesting here. A flop meeting is a meeting where you start the meeting and everyone shares something that went wrong the week before. The most juicy or funny story gets a reward, which can be something like a silly statuette or something. You know, just like a trophy you give every week to someone else. This way you take the drama out of initiatives going wrong, and it becomes an element of rally, of cohesion. Another way is to completely shift perspectives and actually start rewarding it, rewarding initiative taking. Now, rewards come in all sizes and shapes. I'm not necessarily talking money here. It could be about attention, public recognition, status. Make role models out of initiative takers. That will inspire the others. Need for repetition. I often have the same conversation with managers about how, when they deliver a message about new policies, procedures, or strategic goals, they are baffled about how the message doesn't seem to stick. So the inevitable question is, how often should a message be repeated? What I usually answer is, as often as it needs to be. You see, in the same logic of avoiding danger, our brain is constantly looking to reassure itself. As our brain like habits and repetition, to a certain point it also needs it. You see, to our brain what is repeated is true. What happens once can be an error, a mistake, a coincidence. The more it happens, the more our brain will internalize it and take it for granted. What this means is that we shouldn't expect our team to accept any change from the moment we communicate it to them. It's only through endless repetition over and over and over again that our people will accept changes, understand their consequences, and start to act differently. So yes, we have to repeat things over and over again. Some people say it takes 5 to come alive. Some studies go for 6 to 7 times as even better. My advice is to repeat it until it sticks, and even then, just to be sure, repeat it some more. Herding. In the fight for survival, our ancestors quickly realized that sticking together was a successful strategy for making it to the next day. Not only was it useful to fight off possible predators or competing groups, others also became an indicator for safety. If you could see your fellow tribe members at a waterhole, it was a strong indication that that waterhole was safe, without lurking alligators or hungry lions nearby. If your fellow tribe members were eating some kind of new fruit or veggie and didn't show any poisoning symptoms, it was a fair assumption that that food was good for consumption. In other words, the others quickly became an indicator for safety. Following others was a good strategy for survival and for keeping us safe. It turned out to be so successful that evolution turned us into these deeply social beings who yearn for connection with others. We're constantly modeling our behavior to that of others around us, and it works both ways. Let's say we ask everyone at once in an organization to take a big leap, or even a small one for that matter. People are likely to fail to adapt, or just resist to the change, as they are naturally programmed to distrust new situations, and their lack of success becomes the social proof that the aspired change isn't working. Before you know it, the whole transition is a big farce. People are criticizing every aspect of it, and decision makers are trying to save face after looking at this debacle. As leaders, we need to be aware of this and turn this knowledge to our advantage. Whenever we ask our people to walk new paths, we should use what is known as social proof. We should show others did it before them. When we want to instill change, it is far more effective to start with early adopters, get them excited, then show their successful adaptation to others and gain momentum. Before you know it, people themselves will be asking you to switch to the new thing, whatever it is that you're trying to put into place. And worst case scenario, if it isn't working, you'll only have affected a handful of employees instead of your whole team, department or organization. So yes, the first one of the genetic programs we have inherited through millions of years of evolution is the one to keep us safe, to avoid danger. In order to do so on a subconscious level, we're often not very helpful. We like to stick to our little habits and show resistance to change. We show a remarkable lack of initiative. We need to have things be repeated over and over again. And last but not least, we have a strong tendency to go where others go, to do as others do. So knowing this as leaders, we can turn that to our advantage. We can play into that need for avoiding danger by proactively dismantling the perception of a possible threat our teams might have, by being on their side, by rewarding initiative taking, by repeating our message over and over again, and by creating momentum through early adopters. So now it's time for the second survival instinct. This one could be seen as a subcategory of the first one, to avoid danger, as we saw in the previous lecture. Here, this one is all about avoiding starvation. Yes, you heard that right, starvation, as in dying from not eating. For hundreds of thousands of years, especially in a hostile environment where food isn't present in abundance, this has been a real challenge. I'm not even talking about deserts here, or how to survive winter or long periods of drought. It's more basic than that. It's about getting by the fluctuation of going a couple of days without food, because of an unsuccessful hunt or not finding fruit and veggies close by. Having no food to eat is a liability that can have disastrous consequences. So in the same way we have developed these instincts to keep us safe, we also have developed instincts to keep us from starving. Interestingly enough, studies have shown that the whole food and starvation concept nowadays has been replaced by money. Yes, we will be strongly drawn towards everything related to getting more of it, or as a variation, spending less of it. Another variation of the money theme is power. Our lust for both of them has proven to be insatiable over the course of history. The corporate world has known this for ages. Work and you will get money. Salary is solely aimed at answering the call of this primal survival instinct to avoid starvation and has been seen as a great motivator. Now it turns out money, or avoiding starvation, is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you don't give enough of it, you will put them into a state of necessity, which activates the Paleolimbic brain and forces them into submissiveness. We know by now that as the Paleolimbic is active, people forced into submissiveness are into manipulation and the "what's in for me" attitude. They'll grab whatever they can and quickly turn into passive-aggressive actors who will boycott you because of their frustration and resentment. So deliberately putting them there might not be the best move. On the other hand, give too much of it and you'll generate greedy, ego-tripping narcissists with a sense of entitlement that will make working with them almost impossible. Basically, in their brain, it's the Paleolimbic taking over and putting them into dominance stance. A study from Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton wanted to know up to which point our emotional well-being was improved by higher income. You know, the eternal question, does more money make us more happy? Turns out it does, but up to a certain point. They found a strong increase in happiness linked to higher income, up to a certain level of it, after which additional income had no impact anymore on emotional well-being, regardless of how much more they were earning. Interestingly, the researchers were able to put a figure on it. Of course, this figure is not the same everywhere, as it is linked to the standard of living, but still, in the United States, that benchmark was a household income of $75,000. So what does it all mean for us? It's fair to say that when it comes to earnings, the best way to deal with it is just to get it out of the way. We need to pay our people decently so they don't shift into Paleolimbic mode and activate the avoid starvation program. And we don't have to pay them too much either, as it is just a waste of company resources. They won't be happier because of it, or work harder. And if they do, you might be triggering some type of obsessive behavior around money or work, which is usually a highway to burnout. So either way, you're on thin ice. So yes, pay your people decently, so the matter is just off the table, and focus on the job itself. If we're talking sustainable motivation, people shouldn't be working to avoid starvation or to make more money. It should be about the job itself, what they're doing and their love for it. Last but not least of the survival instincts I wish to discuss here is the one about procreation. Sex and nurture, if you will. Interestingly enough, this one is not about personal survival, but the survival of the race, of our species. Nature has embedded in us this extremely powerful program, just to make sure we wouldn't get extinct as a species. So no wonder both sex and nurturing have extensively been used in advertising and movies to get all our chemicals and neurotransmitters fire away and have us bond with the product or story. Anyway, what do sex and nurture have to do with us as leaders? Well, as there aren't that many babies on the work floor, and I'm not talking about mental age here, let's focus on sex for now. Sex is in the realm of the limbic amygdala, activating both the reptilian and the Paleolimbic brain. It's very primal, instinctive, territorial. Because of that, sex is power. Seduction is a game of influence and manipulation. We need to be aware of that. Both men and women use it. It's very effective, but it's manipulative. In essence, when in Paleolimbic dominance mode, we're using the other person for personal gain. Others aren't seen as people anymore, but as a tool to get what we want. Flirting, as innocent as it may seem, should trigger all our alarm systems. We should activate our prefrontal brain and analyze the situation. Start asking ourselves what the flirting person is trying to gain here. But even without flirting, we should be on our guards. So yes, we are attracted to beauty. Little are we aware that we are immediately and purely instinctively scanning the people we meet as potential mating partners. It's not a conscious process. It all happens below the surface. In just a couple of seconds, we make up our mind if we would, yes or no, potentially spend the night with them. Not that we actually would or even have a shot. That's not a consideration. This is not about reality. It's not either about having sexual fantasies with strangers, no. It's just our instincts informing us that a gene pool looks like healthy and would be a worthwhile investment for our chromosomes. Now combine this with the halo effect. The halo effect describes the tendency to use global evaluations to draw conclusions about specific traits. This means that when we find someone, let's say good looking, as with our example of the healthy gene pool, we will automatically assign other characteristics to that person as well. For example, likable and trustworthy. The benefits of making a good first impression on one trait, as superficial as being good looking, has repercussions on other traits as well. The brain, lazy as it is, does what it likes to do. It starts jumping to conclusions. As he or she has a great smile, he or she must be well-mannered, have a good education, be trustworthy, and before we realize it, we're assessing this person's merits as a future business partner or colleague based on looks alone. Now be aware, it works both ways. Lesser looks can have a lasting negative impact on all kinds of future interactions and even stop us from hiring someone. That is, if our paleolimbic brain is taking the decisions here. Hence the importance of activating our prefrontal brain. We should keep a critical mind, especially when we feel attracted to someone. Putting in place SOPs or standard operating procedures regarding hiring, firing, appraisal meetings, giving feedback and even running meetings will help us stay as neutral and professional as is expected from us in a leading role. When we're talking about our genetic program, the first thing we think about are our parents for a pretty obvious reason. Yes, we are the result of a creative combination of two gene pools colliding into a unique set of DNA string. There are no two of us on Earth, unless you have an identical twin somewhere or have been cloned. Okay, anyway, you get the point. But even then, we'll end up unique. You see, the genetic program will ensure we've got 2 arms and 2 legs, all the biological setup we need. Beside that, it also gives us a blueprint for our personalities. Again, defined as the randomized result of both our parents' blueprints. But it doesn't mean we'll end up being like our parents, handpicking some features from daddy and some more from mommy. You see, once the genetic blueprint is formed, only parts of it will get activated based on our surrounding, the environment we'll end up in. A firstborn will get more attention from his or her parents, resulting in a different activation than, just to take an extreme and dramatic example, a baby who ends up in an orphanage. Studies on identical twins separated at birth gave us great insights in this matter. 2 kids with an identical genetic program, when set in a different environment, will develop different personalities. Combine that with neuroplasticity, the fact that our brain continues to evolve, change and adapt all through adulthood, and you end up realizing that who we are is not set in stone. We are the ever-changing result of the combined sum of all of our experiences so far. I'm telling you all this for you to realize that what is coming next is actually more of a fetish of some recruiters and trainers than an actual thing. I'm talking personality profiles here. I'm not going to single any of them out. Many of them are based on the work of Jung. Personally, I'm a big fan of Jung. But let's not forget his main work dates back to before the 1920s. In general, personality profiles are based on the premise that who we are is fixed and that we'll respond to situations in a predictable manner. So we're being assigned numbers or colors or a variation of those. The thing is, we know now that that view is a blatant oversimplification of things. The way we react is partially based on our personality, partially on our prior experiences, and finally on the situation we're in. And most importantly, as a result of new experiences, our reactions can evolve. So trying to find out what personality profile we have or our team members have and then draw conclusions out of that, or even a whole human resources approach and strategy, well, that's pretty much bound to completely miss its target, as you won't be measuring what you think you are. It's an honorable attempt to doing the right thing, but it's far from doing the things right. Having said all that, I will still present you a model for personalities. It's the one I was basing myself upon for the typology around leadership styles. The central idea behind it is that these 8 archetypes do not exist in isolation. Every one of us is a combination of 2 to 4 of these archetypes. Here we're talking intrinsic or primary motivations as a base for our personalities. For an activity to be counted as a primary motivation, it needs to respond to 3 characteristics. First, the activity itself gives us joy. We don't even need to be good at it. Results don't count here. is the sheer pleasure of doing it. Let's take singing, for example. Myself, I love singing, but I'm really just an average singer. Still, I love singing in my car, in my shower, or even make a total fool of myself at karaoke. Second, doing the activity gives energy. It's something that fills us, and we could easily go on and on forever. Last but not least, this activity will remain intrinsic for our entire life. If we enjoyed singing when we were 6, we will still enjoy it when we'll be 60. It's not something that fades over time. Now think about your team and try to spot which type goes with who. Funny part is, it's usually easier to spot intrinsic motivations and personality traits in others than in ourselves. So let's start. The philosopher. Keywords here are optimism, curiosity, consensual. These employees enjoy the simple life. They are flexible and can easily adapt to new challenges, but no pressure. They are usually stress-free, do things at their own pace. They like to involve their team members and discuss items with them. They do well in stressful environments, where their calming presence has a positive influence on others. The innovator. With the innovative employee, obviously the focus is on innovation, abstraction, theories. They enjoy complexity, interdisciplinarity. Having to develop new models, they are always a step ahead, already thinking about the next big breakthrough, when you are still in awe with the current one. They do great in research and development departments or any department with its share of conceptualization. The animator. With the animator, you're in for a ride. These employees thrive in a dynamic environment and strong sensation. They love all the attention they can get. Just like the innovator, they are very creative and have plenty of new ideas, but don't ask them to work them out in details, as that is way too boring for them. As said, they like an ever-changing environment, a multitude of projects, often very diverse. Put them somewhere in the spotlight and they will love you for it. Let them give presentations, for example, or put them in sales. They do well in first impressions, and their natural charisma will help them gain both trust and new deals. Or consulting, of course. The constant change of environment will feel natural to them. The administrator. Here, playtime is over. The Neolimbic administrator is about the administration and safety. We're talking financial control, planning, tools, Excel sheets, reporting, and so on. These employees are at their best in a number environment. They get a thrill out of procedures. Put them in a finance, insurance, or accounting environment, and they will love you for it. They are also great when it comes to safety and prevention. They will be scrupulous about complying the rules and remind everyone to do the same. The strategist. Forget the numbers, here comes the champion of the people. These natural-born leaders are both loyal to their organization and their team. Their natural tendency for harmony, balance, will draw them to mediate and actively solve problems if they arise. Great at organizing and coordinating, they will entrust their team, delegate tasks, empower their people, give training where necessary in order to unlock hidden potential. They will stand with their team, support them, make them grow and find the best in each and every single one of them. So HR is a good place for them. They're also great middle managers, and as they also excel in coordination and organization, this means logistics, even administration or event planning. The competitor. With the competitive employee, whatever you ask from them, don't make it too easy. If they don't have to fight over something, that thing isn't worth having. A victory has to be earned, conquered. It's the cult of the hero that dominates everything. They're not afraid of getting their hands dirty, as long as it's a challenge and not anyone could do it. Make sure to treat them differently. They like a special status. They don't need more than others, just different, privileges. Competitors do great in a competitive environment. Yeah, I know, it's kind of redundant. So give it to them. Sales will so for sure, but also restructuring or short-term projects with concrete objectives will do. The participative personality. Welcome to business with a human face. Remember that old sitcom, Cheers, and the song that went, "Where everybody knows your name"? Well, that is the ultimate dream setting for a Neolimbic participative employee. He or she is the perfect team player. They know everybody by name, but probably also the name of their partner, kids, and even the pets of the other employees. They will do whatever it takes for the team. They listen, support, train, encourage. They thrive in an environment on a human scale. HR, training, coaching are great departments for them. The supportive personality. The Neolimbic supportive employee is a portrait of the selfless employee. Their sole purpose is to serve others. The team is more important than themselves. They are the ultimate altruist, demanding for themselves and tolerant towards others. Discreet, they will operate below the surface, helping others shine and always avoiding the spotlights for themselves. Put them somewhere where they can help others. Back office, reception, customer service. That will give them purpose and fulfillment. So these are the 8 personality types. Remember, no one is only one of these. We are all a combination of 2 to 4 of them. Now look at your team. Have you been able to identify at least one dominant personality trait for each of them? Now think about how you can use that information to make their role, their jobs more fulfilling. Try to adapt their job description to fit their personality some more. Give them responsibilities which are in line with their natural primary motivations, and you'll see their engagement skyrocket. So this brings us to the end of the first set of subconscious programs active in our brain, the genetic programming. As we saw, our individual survival instincts go a long way to make sure we stay out of trouble, and if we do face trouble, we maximize our chances of getting out alive. We had a look at our flight, fight and freeze response and how to deal with that when our team members are under stress. We also looked at how our survival instincts are continuously pushing us to stay safe, with programs such as Avoid Danger and Avoid Starvation. We saw how our sex and nurture urges can be kept in check, so to avoid manipulation and power games on the work floor. Avoiding danger pushes us to unconsciously resist to change, lack initiative, need repetition, and follow others, or herding. And we saw how we could take advantage of this knowledge to improve our communication with our team. With avoiding starvation, we saw how the whole money and wage issue is best to be dealt with heads-on, right from the start, so we can focus on what really matters, the job itself. Talking about the job itself, that's where we looked at our different personality archetypes and how identifying them with our team members, we can start tweaking their job description to better fit their personality types. This will obviously directly impact their job satisfaction and thus improve their overall commitment and engagement. All of this genetic programming is quite peculiar, as none of it is conscious. Well, it can become conscious once we're made aware of it, but mostly we're just being triggered and stress just happens, just like resistance to change, herding or flirting, or enjoying whatever we're doing once we're in our primary personalities. In the next chapter and set of lectures, we'll take another perspective as we'll start from our conscious prior experience, which over time have often become subconscious influencers of our behavior.